Hi guys, welcome back to another session of GMI or NGMI, which means we're gonna discuss about games, whether it's gonna make it or not gonna make it. The audience will get to decide on this. And today we will be discussing about Fableborne by PIXION Games. All right. Before we begin, I'd like to let our audience know that courtesy of Fableborne, we'll be giving out 5 playtest access to the best 5 questions that are being asked on our live stream. So without further ado, let me invite Kam from Fableborne, the founder of Fableborne, onto the stage and introduce himself.
Hi, thank you for having me. Excited to join.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So maybe before we begin, we'll play a trailer of Fableborne so that the audience can get to see how it looks like. Yeah. Let's go.
Ah, the Shatterlands, a realm brimming with might, magic, and mystery. At its epicenter, the all-seeing Esperwood, but beyond, the twisting ether, the arena of the world. Here, competition in the name of fame and glory runs rampant. Observe. Shatterlands brim with as much beauty as they do danger. Will you fight and become Fableborne?
All right, cool. So what do you guys think of the trailer when you first saw it? For me, initially my thought was it's just another Clash of Clans, right? You can see base building, but I've played the game. It's very different. So you get the base building just like Clash of Clans, but mechanics are slightly different. There are monsters, but the raiding is what makes it special. It's like a ARPG, right? Action RPG. You control your hero to attack other people's base. So yeah, basically, that's a short summary of what it is, right? So let's jump on to the one of the questions that I have for Kam is that what inspired the development of Fableborne? Could you share the story behind its inception and what motivated you to create the game?
Yeah, that's a really great question, actually. And so what inspired PIXION, to build games first and foremost is we want to build games that are firstly mobile first, so everyone around the globe can play them, and really are multiplayer. So not only do you play with your friends, but you play and make new friends. And so that was a key component for what we wanted to build as an experience. And then when it comes to the types of games and how we got to Fableborne, we really take a pragmatic approach to trying to find what we call fun. We as a studio have built games that have had tens of millions of downloads, hundreds of million in revenue. And so when we started PIXION a few years ago, we really wanted to make sure that we hit and build for that scale again. And so how do you build a game that is fun before spending 2-3 years, building out the entire progression systems, the meta of the game, and all the content? And so we validate the game by building really quick prototypes. We spend maybe a few months on something that's really rough, generally low production at that point, and then really test with not only the community, but in a stealth test as well, to understand, is this core loop fun? Are players enjoying the game? Are they coming back day after day? And if they are, that gives us a real health check on this core loop is fun, players are finding it engaging, and so we move on. And so prior to Fableborne, we built and killed 5 prototypes. So we're very, very resilient, let's say, in making sure we see that fun and we get that feedback from players, both from what they say and the data that we get back. And if we don't see that we're hitting that scale and we can build a category defining hit, like I say, we're not shy of killing the prototype and starting again. And so that's how we look at building games. And eventually we got to Fableborne, which, like you say, think of it as Clash of Clans meets Diablo with two main differences. The first is with Clash of Clans or other base building games, when it comes to raiding, you drag and drop your units and then you watch. It's a very idle experience, right? In Fableborne, it's a much more engaging experience. You control that hero, so you decide what to attack, how to attack, when to attack. The end result of a raid, it's all on you and the decisions that you make. And so it becomes this really more engaging, more exciting raiding experience in our opinion. And then the second difference is maybe leaning on the action RPG side. Those worlds that you're raiding in Diablo, for example, those worlds are created by us, the studio, the game designers of that game. Whereas in Fableborne, the islands and the worlds that we are all raiding are created by players and can be owned by players. And so user-generated content is a big and really a key part of our core games. So we're excited by, not only the islands that we build as a studio and as designers, but also allowing other players to play each other's islands and raid each other's worlds.
All right, cool. So one interesting fact you brought out was that you actually developed 5 games before you reach Fableborne. Maybe you can explain a bit more, like what are the key learnings from the past 5 games that finally led to Fableborne being born.
Yeah,
and
for
launched.
sure. Again, really, really great question. I'd say there's a few key learnings. There's a lot. We spend a lot of time when we kill a prototype. We spend maybe a week just trying to understand and learn what we did right, what we did wrong. That goes all the way through from our own development process to the game itself, the concept, and the prototype itself. So I'd say one of the main key learnings is moving from real-time multiplayer to asynchronous multiplayer. That was really important for us as a studio, where with real-time multiplayer, you need a really high concurrent user base on day 0. Everyone around the world, when they press play, they join a queue. And if there's not another 8, 10, 15, 24 players in that queue at the same time, then they're waiting. And so the player experience is really diminished. What we don't want to do is build a game and players are waiting, particularly on mobile when, there's lots of distractions and players are very busy and time poor. Waiting for 10, 15, 20 minutes as you would on some PC games, that's just not going to work for a mobile gaming experience. And so that was one of the key learnings, is how do we create a more scalable experience for players? So whether it's just them online or a million players online, they can still play. They're not waiting for others to join. And so that was a key learning. The second, I would say, is really looking at creating a fresh new experience rather than iterating on something that's already there. And that really led to bringing these two genres together. We've brought action RPG and base building, which hasn't been done before, to create this new, almost this new genre, this new subgenre. And that was a real learning, that with mobile gaming right now, where there's thousands of games being released, every year, and has been released for over 13 years, the market is in saturation. There's a lot of games that players can download. So if they're going to download and stay in your game, it has to be new. It has to create an experience that either is better than anything they've played before or is completely new. And so our goal was, how do we create this familiar but really fresh experience for players that they've not had before? And that's also what led to, like I say, Fableborne and creating these new, or bringing these two genres together.
Great. So 2 learnings that I heard. One, the second one was that it's a genre-defining game, which I really agree, because I wouldn't want to download another game and say, oh, this looks like Clash of Clans, or this looks like game A, game B. We've played it before, we've done it, a mobile game for more than 10 years already. So
Yeah.
something genre defining is definitely gonna excite the audience, the gamers. So I'm not sure whether the audience got the idea of the asynchronous gaming. I'm not sure what the term was, but basically means that you do not have to fight players real time. I'm sure our community have play tested a few games whereby we need at least a team of 5v5 or 1v1 that we need to set a time to play together. For Fableborne, you do not need to. You can raid the base anytime. You can build a base anytime, and people can raid yours anytime, right? So with that, I have one more question from my side that we've talked about this. Maybe you could share more what is called the lunchtime esports.
Lunchtime esports, yeah. So that's a new category of games we're trying to build. They have a few key components, let's say, or a few key pillars that define this type of game for mobile. The first is they have a high skill cap, but really accessible controls. And so what that means is that when a player comes in, we want there to be a lot to discover, a lot to master. But equally, we don't want a high bar to entry. So anyone should be able to pick it up and play. The second is that it should be playable in short, snackable sessions. So you can see that everything from it being async to the control schemes itself, we've really spent a lot of time trying to ensure that if a player has 5 minutes, they can jump in, raid a few players, and jump back out. If they want to play for 30 minutes, they can do that too. But it was really important for us that we gave that feeling for players that they can jump in, compete, feel like a champion, and get back to their everyday life. And so that's another key pillar. And then the third, I would say, is having these completely in-app tournaments. And so when I think of esports, I think a very elitist competition, high bar to entry, but also a really bad user experience. By that, what I mean is if I want to compete in a lot of tournaments for most mobile games I play, I have to jump out of a game, go onto a website, sign up to the website, sign up to that tournament, then go back to my game, play, and then in some cases go back to the website and report who won or lost. And that's just too many steps. It's a really poor user experience. And so we're building out what we call PIXION League, essentially tournaments that are all in app that players can enter each week, that have new winning conditions, new rules. So really keep the game fresh as well. But the important thing is that with one tap or one swipe, they're out of raiding another base and they're into PIXION League and we're able to enter into any accessible tournaments or leagues that they're eligible for. So those would be the three main key pillars, I would say, that we define as building games that we call lunchtime esports.
Nice. So yeah, I mean, I've played games before, and then whenever there's a tournament, I have to have two devices, because one to switch on my game, another one to look at the brackets, who am I fighting, and that kind of stuff. It's a bit of a hassle. It's great that it's built in app for Fableborne or PIXION games as a whole. So yeah. Before we move on, there's a few questions in the audience, but before that, I would like to share some gameplay that you guys have shared to us, so that they can understand more what the game is about. And of course, they are going to try out, some of them who are the lucky ones are going to try out the game in the next play test. But yeah, let's play the trailer first so that they can have a look. So that's the raiding part that you guys can see. It requires a bit of quite a precise maneuvering when you guys are playing the offense part. So I've played it. Initially it was easy, but as you move up, you meet stronger bases and you have to think of different ways to achieve your objective, right? So for me, I'm a raider that likes to go straight for the resources. I don't care if I lose the game. So it depends on what kind of player you are with different objectives. So it's a very fun game. I played it. I'm quite addicted to it whenever there's a play test.
And that's a great thing, right? Is rating is completely subjective. So you could watch everyone in the community raid the exact same base, but each raid would be completely different because everyone will control and use that hero in a different way, maybe use a different hero. But the decisions they make, the strategy they use, how they utilize the skills of the hero, all of that is going to be completely unique. And so we're really excited. You know, the wow moment for our players is once they start to build that base and they go on that first raid and they discover, okay, I control this hero. It's up to me what we do rather than idly watching. That's when really, like you said, the wow moment for players when they play Fableborne.
Nice. Okay, so I'm gonna share a secret code for our community because it's like a proof of attendance for them whenever they join our GMI. So the first secret code is Fableborne, right? So now let's move to one of the questions about our community. He asked twice, but basically we will get his second question because there's more detail. So his question is that what is the dev want to do to attract more people, build with fun things? So essentially what he means is that besides the fun thing, how do you manage to maintain the Web3 element just relying on the fun?
Relying just on the fun, sorry?
Now, because we keep talking about how fun it is, right?
Mm.
So how fun it is, Web2 games can achieve it. But how does PIXION games gonna use the blockchain technology to enhance the user experience, being it on Web3?
Yeah, again, really great question from that individual. I'd say first and foremost, it's really important that even before we wrote a line of code, we thought about different player motivations, right? And so when we think of Web2 players traditionally, what they're motivated by, when they play, of course, we keep talking about fun, but they're also motivated to play, with their friends or in social settings, or they're motivated to play because they want to compete and climb the ladder. When you think of Web3, they also have their motivations, but they have an additional motivation, which is, how do I accrue value? How do I create value? And those are very different motivations. And so, like I said, before we even started to write a single line of code, we wanted to think about, do we have a game that allows for different players to win? And by win, I mean very different things. For me, it could be, I just want to compete. I want to be at the top. But for another player, it could be, I want to create value that I can extract. And so it was very important that not only did we have a deep meta game, but a genre that allows us to create really deep progression for those players to go in what we call their own player lanes. And that's why we brought these two genres together. Both base building strategy and action RPG have really deep meta games, and that allow us to create different possibilities in different play lanes. So to come back to the question, how do we incorporate Web3 elements and how do we incorporate blockchain to improve the experience? There's a few main things. Firstly, I'll say what is on-chain is the heroes themselves. Eventually equipment that the hero, that you'll be able to apply and equip to the hero will also be on-chain. And then, of course, the base that you build on, that island, will also be on-chain. And so I mentioned earlier that user-generated content is a big part of our core loop of Fableborne, the core game. That allows us to create some really unique experiences specifically for Web3 players. So as an example, what does that look like? Web3 players can create a base that they then enter into a tournament. They submit that to PIXION, us. We then, out of all the submissions, use 20 bases and create a 20 base dungeon. that will be a event in PIXION League or a tournament. Who can complete this 20 base dungeon in the fastest time? It's actually an event that we ran a few months ago already. And that event will be paid entry. And that creates already now a revenue stream, not only for the studio, for the content creators themselves, so those individuals that built those bases, but also for the winners, those that actually won the competition. And so that's just one way of how blockchain is helping us support players to create value while also adding value to the ecosystem. The content that they're creating, we're using within our tournaments, and it allows them to, like I say, accrue value at the same time.
Great. So I think with the Web3 gaming space nowadays, everyone wants to try to accrue value. But I think a lot of people didn't realize that accruing value isn't just about putting money in and that kind of thing, but more like the time and effort for gamers. So like even in Web2 game, there are like these legendary items that you can achieve through like grinding. That there's no pay to win to it. So I think hopefully Fableborne is using this kind of concept to value accrue as well. Yeah, and then really looking forward to the base building UGC and then rev share is really something unique whereby content creators can have a bit of rev sharing from let's say the participants who try to rate their bases.
Yeah, I think the important thing there is that it's all about sustainability, right? If you don't think before, like I say, before we wrote a line of code, we thought really deeply about how do we create a sustainable system. And we've had the benefit of observing all the games over the last 2 years that have come and gone, and all the economies that haven't been sustainable. And one thing, like I say, that was really important to us is that if a player is creating value and accruing value, they have to have already created value for the ecosystem. And that's where, like I say, creating that user-generated content that we then use as content for our tournaments was a really nice, innovative thought from our game design team. It creates value for us, it creates value for the rest of the ecosystem, and importantly, like I say, allows these base builders to create value for themselves too.
Great. Okay, let's move on to this next question. Since we're talking about blockchain, one of the user Ram's earning channel, his question is that which network are you guys on and why did you guys choose this network?
I'm assuming by that they mean which chain, right?
Correct.
So right now we're working with Avalanche, and Avalanche for us, we chose them for a number of reasons. The first is that obviously the tech, Avalanche subnets are going to be really important when it comes to scalability, being able to push and without being concerned of congestion on the chain because you're on your own subnet, you'll be able to scale from 0 to millions of players without worrying about throughput and congestion of the Avalanche C chain. The second part is being able to absorb and consolidate any gas fees with your own native token or a stable coin, whatever that may be. That again is going to be really important because when it comes to creating a nice on-ramp or smooth onboarding, particularly for Web2 players, if they're having to create a MetaMask wallet or buy some Avalanche, buy some AVAX or USDC or ETH or whatever it may be, before they can even purchase anything, they're going to churn. And so being able to build onto our own subnet, consolidate that item, it just costs one Fable coin, whatever it may be, or one USDC. And all of that gas fee is absorbed in that one price. They don't need additional tokens. That's going to make transactions and the user experience for transactions really smooth. And so that was a key component of choosing Avalanche. The second is actually the Avalanche's team's focus on gaming. They really understand gaming. Ed, Parker, they've come from EA Sports. They've built their huge, gigantic IPs, particularly in competitive gaming over the last 10 years. And so when we came to them with Fableborne, our vision for lunchtime esports, bringing esports to everyone, not only the top 1% of players, they really understood that vision. They really were excited for how we were trying to build that vision. And they really understood, like I say, why we were making some of the decisions we were of keeping some of the game off chain, some of it on chain. And we didn't get that experience with all the other chains. And so that's why we chose Avalanche. Having said that, I do see the future for us in particular, but blockchain gaming in general, as being cross-chain or multi-chain. I do believe chains are going to act as almost like distribution channels, being able to access players in different geos and different territories, just like we do now with deploying our game on, the Apple App Store, the Google Play Store, the Samsung Store, or the Epic Game Store. There's all these different platforms to be able to distribute your games. I think blockchains will eventually consolidate in the next 3 to 5 years, and there'll be 3 or 4 chains that everyone will want to be on. And so we're starting with Avalanche. We won't end there, but right now that's where our focus is.
Great. So they chose Avalanche. I think 2 main things is they reduce the user friction, right, regarding gas fees and transaction, how fast it takes. And it's a very good gaming focused scene. Avalanche has been building, their BD are working very hard on the gaming as well. So there's one question from our audience that the Arvis asked how much you can play the game every day, because he mentioned that most mobile games have energy system with a daily limit. So maybe you can only play like 10 games, 20 games a day. Does Fableborne has this limitation?
We don't have that in the game right now. Personally, I don't like that, because if I really enjoy a game, I want to just be able to play that game. I want to be the one that decides, do I play 5 minutes or 5 hours? It should be up to me, the player. And so we don't have this energy limit. If a player wants to come in and raid, and they want to raid one player's base or 10 players' bases, they should be able to do that. And so we don't want to cap the amount of time that they can spend within the game. Of course, we want it to be accessible, but yeah, if they're having fun, enjoying the game, they should be able to continue to do that.
Yeah, I fully agree. I mean, like some gamers can't play on certain days, but they just want to, go ham on like a weekend. So those with energy system, it's a bit of, I think it turns off some people as well. If you're a gamer, that you are restricted to a certain, energy limit, right? So, okay, so there's one very interesting question here is that from Lance, how can the Fableborne team ensure that the game's balance between difficulty and enjoyment is maintained throughout the gameplay experience?
Yeah, that's a really great question from Lance, actually. And it's one question that we consistently always review as a game design team. This is the bread and butter balancing. And so as a raider, when you're playing a base, if you've got level 5 heroes and then you're playing against level 12 bases, it's going to be really unfair. And so matchmaking and ensuring that our matchmaking queue is really fair is really important. So we take not only one data point, for example, your trophy count, but we also take into account your hero levels, the delta between the base that you're playing against and the total level of your heroes. We also look at, and we'll eventually start looking at, the winning streak you're on. So if you're on a 10 raid winning streak and things are seeming to be too easy for you, we'll start to put into your matchmaking queue player bases that are maybe 1 or 2 levels higher than what you've previously faced. And so it'll be a greater challenge. Equally, if you're on a losing queue where you've lost the last 10 raids, no one's going to find that fun. So it's really important, like Lance says, that we strike a really fair balance between difficulty and enjoyment. In that point, the game will provide you with bases that are either similar level or slightly lower level, so you can start to understand the game, maybe the core loop better. You can start to improve your skills before we start matchmaking you against harder bases. but it's not a one-stop execution, and then we never face it again. We're consistently, with every build, always looking at our matchmaking, and it's always going to be, a live document that we review, and a live process that we continue to iterate upon and always rebalance.
Great. Seems like there's a lot of thoughts behind the balancing of the gameplay. I think, we don't want to keep it too long, so this will be the last question, and I'm going to choose it very carefully. I think this might be a good ending question. What's the final end game for Fableborne? What's the final vision? Or let's say even for PIXION games.
I think the final vision for us as a studio is we want to create, like I say, these mobile-first multiplayer games that can be played in short snackable sessions by everyone. And so we want to be known as a studio that when you think of competitive multiplayer games that you can play on the go, you play our games. You think of PIXION games. And equally, we want to be known for creating this new category of competitive gaming we call lunchtime esports. So when you think about playing competitively and wanting to feel like a champion when your life permits, you think of entering into PIXION League. You think of going to PIXION games and looking at what games they've built. And so I hope in the next 5 to 10 years, we've not only built one game in Fableborne, but we've built a number of games that are really successful. We've been able to use PIXION League to drive our live ops, so events not only for our own team, but also use PIXION League and use that for other game studios so they can use in-app tournaments to drive engagement, to drive retention, and provide fun, competitive experiences for their users and for their players. So I hope, in the next 5-10 years, we've been able to look back and build that.
Great. Okay, I know I can't take everyone's question. Let's answer one more to clear up the space as well, right? So this question is that, how do you handle the game when the token getting low price in the future?
I think that's the question that everyone in the space is trying to answer right now. But the first I would say is not to launch a token until after the game is live. The mistake that we've seen is that many launch a token before they've even got a pre-alpha, and so they make a lot of assumptions about their game's economy, about when players will convert from players to payer, their sources and sinks, whether they have any levers within their economy to try and counter any inflationary pressure on a token. All of that is guesswork. It's all assumptions because you don't have live player data. So I would say not to do that until your game's live. That then gives you, real-time data on your economy. You can understand, do you have source and sinks that are balanced? Can you counter any inflationary pressure? Do you have a deep enough meta and enough demand for your token to sync that into multiple different areas? And if you don't, then you shouldn't be launching that token because it's going to be really difficult to counter any market pressure. And as we've seen, if you're not able to counter that price pressure, you drop with the market and you enter into this death spiral, and that's really hard to come back from. So I'd say first and foremost, arm yourself with the information so when you launch that token, you're very confident that the game and the economy is large enough, deep enough, and there's enough demand for that token within the economy.
Great. So I think the main point is, they will work on it. They need more data to find out whether, how are they going to launch the token. So in short, there'll be no Fableborne token yet, right? If there's any, they will announce it. So you know what to do. Follow them on their Twitter. That's where you get all the news. All right. So before we end, so I would like to thank Fableborne for giving us actually 75 access to their next playtest, which is quite a big portion. For the next playtest, how many players are you expecting?
So we're going to look just over 1,000 players. That's going to be a combination of obviously our own community, and then we're selecting around 3 to 4 other communities. So excited to have the PathDAO community be one of those communities to enter into this next playtest with us.
Great. So they've given us 75 playtest access. So I've given out 6 today already for those who have asked the questions. So the rest of them, I'll let you guys know how to get it. It'll be on our Discord. So if you're not on our Discord, you better be on our Discord. So right. So I would like to thank Kam for Fableborne for taking his time to answer all the questions that we have, and I hope that it really give you guys enough information, and also with all the trailers, I hope that it gets you guys excited to actually play test that game. So being one of the first to play test means you have a very early advantage when it comes on officially. So before we end, Kam, do you have any last words for the audience?
Firstly, actually, just really impressed by the really deep, pointed questions. It shows that the community is really well-rounded, but understands Web3 gaming. They're not looking for, from my perception, Ponzi-nomics or pyramid schemes or short inflationary tokens that go up and next month go down. We're really looking to believe in projects and teams that are building for the long term. So I was super impressed by the questions. In terms of what we've got coming up with Fableborne, the next 2 months is probably going to be the biggest in Fableborne's life to date. We've got some major announcements coming up. We might also announce not only our new playtests, but information about our first NFT mint and how to get that. So following us in the next few weeks is going to be crucial, but we've got some incredible stuff planned.
Great. So you guys know what to do. Follow their Twitter. Right. So everyone's been waiting. What's the last secret code? It is PIXION Games. PIXION Games. Right. This is their studio. Fableborne is their game. So PIXION Studio might launch more games in the future. So you guys gotta follow them on their socials. Right. So all right. I will take this chance to thank everyone, our audience, for taking the time to be here. We'll catch you guys the next time. See you. Bye.